At this point. I'm here because, those of you who don't know, I sadly lost my wife and two daughters in a terror attack in April during Pesach on the way up to Tiberias. And I've been through a trauma which I think most people would assume to be very, very large on a personal level. And now Am Yisrael is going through what I would describe as a similar level of trauma on a group, a sort of a national level. And I think that some of the lessons which I've learned over the last 6 months, literally 6 months, because it happened on the 7th of April, this was the 7th of October, apply to the grief that we're feeling now. And I'd like to say that, to start this off by saying that the things like I'm saying to you now are things which your rabbis are perfectly capable of saying to you, but probably don't feel they have the license to say. And because of what happened to me, I feel like I have the ability to say it. So I'm not saying anything particularly special, except that I do have the ability to say it in a way that other people don't at the moment. We're obviously all feeling shocked and saddened and grieved and bored and disgusted, and if I had a thesaurus with thousands of words, they wouldn't express how we are feeling, and we're feeling all these feelings together: fear, etc. And that's one way of reacting to the situation. But I'm not going to present you with that, because that's the sort of natural feeling that comes anyway from our souls, and that's why I'm going to present you with a different option, which may be something which perhaps you haven't heard from other people up to this point. Just one introduction to this. When I went through this grief, one psychologist that I had gave me a very interesting insight. He said, what you're feeling is actually two parallel feelings which are disconnected. He said, one is your life has changed, right? You've lost your wife, you lost your girls. Shabbat dinners are not going to be the same. You come home at night, you're not going to speak to your wife. So your whole routine, your daily routine has changed. And that is one type of stress that you're feeling. And the second type of stress that you're feeling is that every time you think about them, you see this massive gap and this massive void and this massive potential that never came to fruition. So that's a second type of pain, but they're two separate pains. One is the change in your routine, and the second is the feeling of loss. And actually, I think if we separate them in that way, it's a very useful thing, because we are all feeling a change in our routine. We're now in the middle of a war, and we're also feeling the shock and sadness of what happened to Jewish people on Shabbat. And I think those are two separate feelings, and bli neder, I will try to come back at the end and address how we discuss those. And if I don't, please somebody remind me. But let's say that actually if we think about what is a Jewish model of dealing with shock and tragedy, and because I'm not such a great Talmud Chacham, the person who comes straight to mind is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, who had 24,000 students, he trained them up over 24 years, and then he saw them all massacred, probably by Roman soldiers, during a campaign with Bar Kokhba, over 50 days between Pesach and Shavuot, not long after the destruction of the Second Temple. There was 500 levayas a day, which, to put in perspective, is less than half the number of levayas that had to take place because of this tragedy. So Rabbi Akiva, but what did he do when 24,000 students were killed? He stopped. Most people would have just gone into depression, would have given up, and would have gone into oblivion. But Rabbi Akiva didn't do that. Rabbi Akiva picked himself up, handpicked 5 amazing students: Rabbi Be'er, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, another couple of students, and they rebuilt the Torah between them, and they were the main rabbis of the Mishnah. So what type of person can witness the death of 24,000, not just students, but probably close friends, people that he had his whole life with, and then pick himself up and start from scratch? And then, of course, there's the story of Rabbi Akiva on the Temple Mount. Soon after the destruction of the temple, they see a fox, and he laughs. And his friends say to him, "Why are you laughing?" And he says, "Because there are 2 prophecies. There was the prophecy of Micha, who said that the Second Temple would be destroyed. And then there was the prophecy of Zechariah that said that the third temple would be built. And if I hadn't witnessed the destruction of the second temple, I wouldn't believe Zechariah that the third temple would be rebuilt. Now I've witnessed that, I now believe that the third temple will be rebuilt. I'm laughing in joy because I have a hope that we will see the third temple. And he believed it would happen quickly, speedily in his days under Bar Kokhba. It didn't quite work out that rapidly. And then there's a third story of Rabbi Akiva when he's being flayed alive, right? And he says, Shema Yisrael. By the way, Shema Yisrael, according to Rashi, does not mean, I believe in God. It actually means, according to the first parish of Rashi, if you look in Devarim, he says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God, the God who is our God today, will be the God of all the world in the future. One God. Okay? And that's very interesting and important because when Rabbi Akiva shouts out Shema Yisrael, his students say, Ad Kan? To that extent? Now, if he meant, I believe in God, what's the Havra mean? What would you even think that Rabbi Akiva wouldn't believe in God, even Banashacha, right? Even when they're taking his life. But if you say that actually what Rabbi Akiva was saying to the Romans was, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, my God will be your God in the future. Your people will believe in my God, right? That's a massive chidush. And that level, the students say, do you really care about these people? They're peeling off your skin while you're alive, and you really care that they're going to believe in our God. Let them go to hell. Let's focus on the Jews. But Rabbi Akiva didn't do that. Rabbi Akiva said, no. He said, I believe that you are going to believe in our God in the future. Of course, they adopted Christianity, which some people might say had some bearing on our God. So in any case, that was Rabbi Akiva. Huge amount of optimism in the face of trauma and face of tragedy. And I think that is the model that we need to have at this point. And there's another Gemara which says the following. 3 things happen in the blink of an eye, the hair of ayin. Mashiach, Metzia, and a Krav. The Mashiach will come, you find a lost object, and you get stung by a scorpion. And 6 months ago I wouldn't have been able to explain that, but now I can explain to you exactly what I think it means. I discovered my Metzia, my lost object, Tikkun Leil, Shavuot, 1995, Oxford University. Lucy was the head of the Jewish Society, the Hillel, organizing Tikkun Leil, Shavuot. I came to visit a friend. I met her and immediately decided I was going to marry her. I didn't tell her. She went off to Japan for a year, came back a year later. We started going out. 6 months later, we were engaged. 6 months later, when she graduated, we were married. She was my lost object, and she changed my life in the flicker of an eyelid. And akrav is a low-level form of life. All it can basically do is eat, move, and actually pretty slowly on a flat surface, and kill. And I think that there is no greater symbol of a Palestinian terrorist than a scorpion, which is a very low form of life that can basically eat, move slowly, and kill. And I experienced that 6 months ago, and my life changed in an instant. And I think Am Yisrael experienced their akrav on Shabbat, and that changed the future of our lives in an instant. So I want to say, based on what Rabbi Akiva, if I hadn't experienced the akrav, and I hadn't experienced the Metzia changing my life in an instant, I would not believe that Mashiach could also come in an instant. But now that I've experienced those two, I can now believe that Mashiach will come in an instant. And I think that this what happened on Shabbat has woken us all up to how life changes dramatically in a moment. And I think that, I'm sure your rabbis have mentioned this, of course this is Shabbat Bereshit. And Shabbat Bereshit is very appropriate for where we are now, because we are in a new world. We are starting again. This world is starting again. And B'tohu v'bohu al pnei tohum. There was tohu and bohu, there was chaos. That describes beautifully what was going on a week ago amongst Am Yisrael fighting about rubbish, and it explains beautifully what happened on Shabbat, chaos, when these terrorists came in and massacred our people. So that's the beginning of Bereshit. And then it goes on to say, Hashem said, V'hi'or, v'hi'or, there was light. About Monday morning, maybe Sunday night, the world woke up to a new reality, and there was light, and people who previously believed that there was a prospect of peace with Hamas, and that these people were good people, and that we were occupying their land, and suddenly everybody woke up, and we saw Biden, who I thought was, and many people thought was brain dead, actually standing up and making a speech that was so inspired. It was only possible if Hashem was speaking through his mouth. And we say, Lev Malachim B'Yad Hashem, that everybody has free choice except for Malachim. And it seemed to me that he had no free choice, that his emotion, his passion, his words, everything were coming as a funnel from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I think that we'll find that secular Jews in New York who are Democrat voters and go to Reform synagogues suddenly will become our greatest allies, attacking Hamas, destroying terror, and that attitudes have changed dramatically. So we're in a totally new world. And then it says in the Torah that there's a mabdil bein mayim v'mayim, havdalah, there's a separation between water and water, and so we're in this phase now of separating the Palestinians between regular Palestinians and terrorists, and that process has to continue until we can eliminate the terrorists completely, and then we'll be in the position of v'tidshe deshe, that the land can sprout forth its growth, and we can start growing together in peace. And that's the process of Shabbat Bereshit. I think it's where we find ourselves. We're in incredible times. You've seen probably more TikTok videos and Telegram videos than I have, so you're probably more aware of them. But I'm sure everybody saw the non-kosher restaurants in Tel Aviv that koshered themselves in order to provide food for soldiers. And some of them were run by people who were so anti-religious that it's absolutely incredible. And suddenly, within 24 hours, they were koshering their restaurant. And then we saw the story of the religious guy who was handing out clothes to soldiers, and he said to the soldier, "What would you like?" And he said, "There's only one thing I'd like is tzitzit." He said, "Well, that's the one thing I don't have." So the guy took off his tzitzit, he handed it to the soldier put it on, he said, "I will return it to you when I come back alive at the end of this war." And then we had the story from Rabbi Gottlieb, which I heard on his podcast, I think, that he said that on Sunday when they called up the Air Force to serve, said they called up 100%, expecting that only 60% would turn up for duty because 40% had been refusing to come. He said they were very surprised when 120% turned up. He said, "How's 120% turn up?" He said, "Because not only did 100%, everybody who previously had refused to come actually turned up, but 20% of people who hadn't even been invited said, 'Why did you not ask us to come? We're coming anyway.'" So we went from apparent 60% achdut to 120% achdut in 24 hours. How does that happen? It happens, I'll tell you why, because there was never a breakdown in Achdut. It was only a hester panim, it was like a mirror. We thought that there was a breakdown in Achdut. The Jewish people cannot actually have a breakdown in Achdut. I'll explain to you why. And the reason is as follows. There's a mitzvah in the Torah, which we read on Sukkot, and we read on Pesach, and obviously one other time during the year, which is, the mitzvah is Otov et Bano, right? That it's forbidden to shochet, to slaughter, a cow and its calf on the same day. And if you do that, the person who does the second slaughtering is going to get makot deraita. That means 39 strikes from the Torah. So this is an odd mitzvah, according to Rav Sorotsky in Nosnei Torah. Right? He says it's very odd. Why? Because he says Chaimi Cohen chooses that cow. Okay, then I choose b'kavadah with intention the calf to shochet it. Right? Because Chaimi Cohen first had killed that cow, and then I came afterwards and I shocketed the calf, so I'm going to get makot deraita. I said, if he'd have chosen that cow and I'd have had the same calf, I would have been lechatchila, I would have been absolutely fine. It would have been perfectly permissible. I could have done it, no problem at all. So he says, that is unique. He said, because normally when I get a punishment from the Torah, it's because I did something wrong myself, 100% wrong. I ate something wrong, I did something wrong, I didn't keep Shabbat, I did something, whatever. I did it, I get the punishment, I understand that. But why do I get a punishment based on what Chaimi decided in the morning? And he said, there's only one explanation. And the explanation is as follows. He said, if we say that Am Yisrael is 14 million bodies, but one soul, one neshama, then that makes sense. Because Chaimi Cohen, when he chose that cow, that was my neshama choosing that cow. When I chose that calf, that was my neshama choosing that calf. So I did the whole avera, right? But if you don't say that, it makes no sense whatsoever. So the Am Yisrael is one soul, which also explains something else. Because if you notice, this last week we had the Nobel Prizes. There are 7 Nobel Prizes, 2 of which were won by Jews. And 20% of Nobel Prizes in history have been won by Jews, and 40% of physics prizes. And that's astonishing because 0.2% of the world population is Jewish. That's 100 times more than we would expect. And what's more astonishing is that Hitler, Yamach Shemo, destroyed a half of European Jewry, and most of those Nobel Prize winners were European Jews who either lived in Europe or went to America. So if it hadn't been for Hitler, presumably we would be winning 40% of all Nobel Prizes and 80% of physics prizes. So how is it possible that 0.2% of the world's population could be winning pretty much 50%, be making 50% of the impact on the world, probably much more than that? And I think the answer is as follows. If you imagine, I don't know any American sportsmen except O.J. Simpson, which I'm sure is not a very good name, but O.J. Simpson playing football, I think, yeah, against 3 million 3-year-old toddlers, right? I mean, assuming that he could maneuver himself around the pitch, right, he would still win. Doesn't matter. So the fact that we are 14 million people in a world of 8 billion, we have a neshama which is the height of 14 million. They have, every single one is like a sort of individual neshama. So the Jewish people bat much stronger than our weight. Okay, so the question is, why? Lama? Okay, and I said at the levaya of my daughters, I said, the question is not lama, this is based on Rabbi Soloveitchik, it's not lama, not why, but lama, for what? On the other hand, we're all asking why. And I want to just address this very briefly. There is no answer, but I'll give you an answer. Recently I've listened to a number of Rabbonim in Shul on Shabbat, and they've given droshes, the standard drosha, everything Hashem does is for the good, we don't always see it, but it's always for the good. That doesn't really speak to me anymore after what I've been through. So I find that not very helpful. However, at the Shiva, somebody brought me a set of books of Rav Chaim Friedlander called Siftei Chaim. Rav Chaim Friedlander was a Talmid of Rav Dessler, and he was a Mashgiach of Ponevezh Yeshiva, and he quotes from the Ramchal, the Rambam. He's got pretty much the whole picture here on Emunah, and I opened it up, and he gave a beautiful idea which I would like to share with you. He said Hashem works through two different mechanisms. Hashem works through two different mechanisms. Number one is chava onesh, right, which means reward and punishment. Okay, and number two is by mazal. Okay, what's reward and punishment, and what's mazal? Well, mazal, he said, is loshon, is the language of nizila, nozelet, right, which means dripping. Right, if you have a leak, it's called a nozelet, or something. If you have a dripping nose, it's called one or the other. I always get confused. It's a drip. So I like to understand as follows. Imagine you have one of those kosher meals on your airplane and it comes wrapped in cellophane, right? That's our lives, that's your lives, that's my life, last 20 years, last 50 years. We've lived with schava, pretty much with schava onesh, right? Everything we know in life has been pretty much routine. Please God, I imagine most of you haven't gone through massive trauma. And basically, if we live a Jewish life and keep Shabbat, we have good mental health. If we live in a nice Jewish community, we have a lot of friends. If we bring up our kids to respect their parents, then we have nice families. So basically, Schava Onesh. If we behave like Rishayim, so we have a terrible life. Okay, that's basically how it's worked for the last 20 years, 50 years, or whatever for our lives. And then suddenly, there's this concept of mazal, right? So that's what's happening inside the package, right? Everything's pretty, Hashem made the laws of nature, they're all designed to make things go well. People recognize what's good, so Gula happens slowly, but eventually the world improves because Hashem made all the rules. But what happens if Gula is not happening, if things are not improving at the rate that Hashem wants? What happens if you have a Hitler, Yamach Shema, who does a bit more than Hashem planned, or you have Hamas, Yamach Shema, who does something completely, free will, they do something which is out of the blue. Hashem still wants Gula to happen, so he has to prod the world, and he sticks a pin into the cellophane, and he prods inside, and he makes a few changes, and things just sort of adjust, and then Gula is going to happen at the right time. And who does he prod? He prods Am Yisrael, because Am Yisrael are his agents of changing the world. Okay, so I found that reassuring, because even though I suffered, and even though we're all suffering, there's a reason for it, according to Rav Chaim, and I found that comforting. He doesn't explain why, it doesn't explain who he chooses, it doesn't explain when he does it, and doesn't explain what his objective is exactly, but I think it gives us an idea. And I like this idea of Srava Onesh and also of Mazal. And I'll show you something. If everyone takes out the tzitzit, anyone who's wearing, you don't have to be wearing a tzitzit because it's a mitzvah kumit, but anyone who's wearing tzitzit, maybe take out your tzitzit and have a look at the tzitzit, okay? How many strings are there in your tzitzit? In a tzitzit? 4, right? And how many ends of the strings are there? 8. Okay, now I challenge you. Okay, I want you to take 2 ends of the same string and hold them together in your hand. Okay, now you're looking confused. Why? You can't do it, right? Why can't you do it? Because basically the knots here make it much too complicated. Okay, so this is the beautiful sign of Mazal. In other words, I know that there are 4 strings here. Okay, but I know that they're connected, but I cannot physically connect the 2 together, right? Unless I have a techelet, by the way. If I have a techelet, then I only have one, and I know which ones connect. And the techelet is described as what's the Midrash say about the Techelet, right? What's the Techelet for? It's to remind us of the Yam reminds us of the Rakia reminds us of the Kisei Kavod. Now, why do the Midrash give it in all this complexity? Why don't you just say it just reminds us of God, right? The blue reminds us of God. I'd like to say as follows, because it's saying is that actually the Techelet is for people who can see Hashem in the Yam, in the Rakia, in the Kisei Kavod. They can see Hashem in everything in nature. If you're that person who can see Hashem in everything, then for you, Mazal doesn't really apply. Then you can connect the ends. Okay, for everybody else amongst us, we're all white strings, and actually there is confusion. Then Rav Chaim, by the way, says that in fact there can't be 2 mechanisms because Hashem is one. So in fact, all the mechanism is Mazal. It's just that sometimes we think that we understand Srava Onesh and we understand why that person suffered, right? But the truth is we don't understand anything. So that's the point. Why is this interesting? I think because if we say, in the Shema, right, what's the first paragraph of the Shema saying? In one word, what is the meaning of the first paragraph of the Shema? Yeah, love God, understand God, emunah, believe in God, right? I understand why I teach Shema to my kids as the first thing they need to learn. I understand why I say it twice a day, because emunah, believing in God, is a pretty important message. Okay, what's the second paragraph of the Shema? Srava Onesh, right? It's like reward and punishment. I understand why I teach my kids, if you believe in God, then you remember there's Srava Onesh, there's reward and punishment, be a good person, right? What's the third paragraph of the Shema? Tzitzit, right? What is it doing there, right? Okay, it's Mitzrayim, it's on Mitzvot, nobody knows, right? I'd like to suggest that maybe the reason is because actually it's talking about Mazal. It's talking about exactly this idea that actually that's the other mechanism that we have to understand, that we have to have faith in Hashem, even when we have things like this, that Mazal, we have things happening that we don't understand. And in those cases, that we should not take this as an opportunity to go off and say, okay, there's no God, and we'll do what we like. So what can we do? Okay, this is the question. This is the lemma. What do we do now? And I think as Jews, we know that there's 3 responses that we have in life. And the second Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says that the world stands on Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Basically on Torah, on prayer, and on action. Okay, so I want to address those 3 and discuss how we can address this current situation through Torah, through prayer, and through action. First of all, Torah. Rav Sachs Zatzal was my teacher and one of my inspirations in England for many years. And he died on Parshat Chai Sarah, and he had a beautiful insight into Chai Sarah, which I always give on his yahrzeit. And the insight is as follows. Chai Sarah is the last Parsha of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu is 130 years old getting into this Parsha. Okay, Hashem has promised him 3 things. You're going to inherit the whole land of Israel, your children are going to be like the stars in the sky, and you're going to be connected to every nation in the world. And there's a problem, says Rav Sachs. He's 130 years old. He doesn't have a square millimeter in the land of Israel. His son isn't married. He's got no grandchildren. And he's got no connection whatsoever with any other nation in the world. So says Rav Sachs, what does Abraham Avinu do? Abraham is the Dugmei Sheet, the example to us all. He buys the first piece of land in Israel. It's Marat Machpelah. He marries off his son to Rivka through sending out his servant to find Rivka, and he remarries at the end of the parasha. Keturah has 6 sons, gives them Indian names, sends them off to the east, that Rashi says is Hodu, is India, with Metanot, which some rabbis say is the Kabbalah. They set up Hinduism and Eastern religions, and by the way, the main god in Hinduism is Brahma. So figure that one out. Okay. So in other words, Avraham Avinu is in a crisis. He's 130 years old and he doesn't know what to do. What does he do? He reverts to what Hashem told him he has to do, and he does it. Our problem is in this crisis, we didn't have Hashem telling us what to do, but we did have Hashem telling us what to do. Okay? Because we have something which Avraham Avinu didn't have at his disposal. Ratzon Hashem. What do we have that Avraham Avinu didn't have? Ratzon Hashem. Hashem. Yeah, but which is the Torah, right? We have the Torah. So basically, any Torah that we have at the point at which we hit a crisis is what is going to help us in that crisis. I can tell you from my experience that when I hit the crisis 6 months ago, it's like you're in a dark room and you're grabbing onto whatever is closest to you to hold on to. And if it's emunah, and if it's mitzvot and masim tovim, so that's what you grab onto. But if, God forbid, you don't have that, you grab onto drugs and depression and other things. So the Torah that you all have up until this point is what's going to help you through this current phase. Okay, I'm not sure that there's a lot of time to acquire a lot more, but obviously every bit of Torah that you learn now will help you with the next crisis. So that's number one, Torah. What about prayer? Prayer is very odd, because we're effectively saying to God, we want you to do this. Now, if we think Hashem's made his mind up, why do we need to tell him what to do? And if we think Hashem is all-powerful, all-knowing, we don't need to inform him what we want, and we're not going to change his mind anyway. So the best explanation I heard of this was from Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. He said a couple of years ago, in Florida, there was a lottery ticket that won $150 million in the lottery. And they knew exactly which shop it had been bought in because they had it registered on the machine. And they were just waiting for the guy to turn up with a ticket, and the guy didn't turn up. It was a week in and week out. It was headline news and trying to call this guy to find this ticket. They knew the number, they knew everything. Nobody came and claimed it, and in the end it went back into the box. And Rav Ephraim said, this is a beautiful mashal, parable of prayer. He says, Hashem wants to give us $150 million. He says, all he wants us to do is to come forward with the ticket. Okay? He's waiting to give it to us. He wants, if Am Yisrael were to come, all of us together today, and say, we're praying for the freeing of the hostages and safe return of our soldiers, then he will give it to us. But that's what he wants, but we have to come. So prayer is very important, but that's also maybe a couple of hours a day. So we have Torah and we have prayer, so that's not going to be enough in this particular case. So the question is, what can we do? And I think it comes down to the Gemilut Chassidim, it comes down to action. That's what we need to do. You guys are here at a turning point in Jewish history. Okay, for whatever reason, Hashem has selected you, our generation, to be here in Eretz Israel at this momentous time. This is probably the most important time for the Jewish people in history ever. Okay, I'm going to make that statement. You can challenge it. And you came over from America. Now your parents didn't come here then, and your grandparents, if they'd come, it wouldn't have happened to them. It's your generation, it's exactly you. And you've just arrived here, many of you, and you've come here for a purpose. Why have you come here? I'll tell you why you've come here, because Hashem wants you to be his army in this war. Okay, there are guys out there risking their lives on the front, and they're doing an amazing job, and they're brave, and they're risking their lives. But there's a second battle that has to take place, which is no less important. And that battle is the battle for wills across the world. Okay, because we know that generally speaking what happens in a war in Israel is that we have a few days of leeway, we can fight, and everybody supports us, they attacked us, we're the victim, and then suddenly what happens is it all turns around, and suddenly they're the victim, and we're the aggressor, and everybody says, okay, enough now, stop. This is not a war that we can afford to stop. This is a war that has to go through to completion. And the only way it will go through to completion is if we can generate enough positive will somehow across the whole world in order to give us the moral ability to continue with this war. And that's something which the guys on the battlefield with their guns are not able to do. That's something which you guys are perfectly suited to do. And I'm telling you something that in Israel, one of the things they lack desperately is people with good English. Anyone who's traveled to Ra'anana will know that as you're traveling along, the first sign says Ranana, R-A-N-A-N-A. The second one says R-A-A-N-A-N-A. The next one says R-A-N-N-A-A-N-A. And literally every possible permutation of double A's, double N's is visible as you're driving to Ranana. And Israelis think that they know English and they have not a clue. I was, on Sunday, went to the Misrad HaHasbara, which is the Ministry of Information, or whatever you want to call it. And I said to them, look, I have the most recent experience of talking about terror to the world media successfully, not necessarily out of skill, just out of, just happened to be what I said, hit a chord apparently. I said, I would like to give you a few pointers. Anyway, I went there. In the meantime, they sent me a few videos, and the English on these videos could have been written by a 3-year-old in a Petach Tikva gun. And in the end, I ended up sending them to be edited by my 17-year-old nephew in London. But honestly, the quality that's coming out of, from Israelis is very, very poor, and it's not going to make any impact whatsoever. And the quality that's coming from American Jews and from British Jews and from European Jews is very high quality, and you guys are here on the spot, and you guys could help dramatically, okay? If you're somebody who knows how to make, if you're somebody who consumes a lot of Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or any of these things, then you're probably somebody who could actually produce it as well. Now is not the time to consume, now is the time to produce and to send it out in those networks and to mekadesh those networks that you've used for so many years. Okay, that's the reason that Hashem gave you that those networks. Okay, that's one possibility. The second possibility, this is a crisis of incredible proportions. I got a call from the head of one family. One family is the main charity that deals with bereaved families from terror in this country. He said to me, Leo, do you know, he said, the number of bereaved families in Israel doubled on Shabbat. The number of bereaved families in Israel doubled on Shabbat. Okay, that means that over the last 20, 30 years, the number of terror victims equals the number that was created on Shabbat. Okay, and the numbers are increasing because of the war that's going on, and of course all no, that's not even mentioning the number of soldiers who are being killed at the moment as well. Just to sum up, I said at the beginning that tragedy has two impacts. Of one, it changes your life and your routine, that unsettles you, makes you nervous, makes you on edge. The second thing, when you think about the tragedy, it makes you sad. Okay, how can we deal with that? If we do action, if we take this as a call to action, the action fills up the time, actually fills us with enthusiasm. We get out of bed in the morning in order to play our part in this war. And when we think of those terrible victims over Shabbat, and we feel that we're actually contributing to doing something in their memory, that's a way of thinking about them, memorializing them in a positive way. So we can actually deal with both aspects of our trauma by actually getting involved and getting active, and that is a much healthier aspect and approach than sitting here in tears and concern and fear.